Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's ubnradio.com.
Welcome back. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Larry X's show. If you open your eyes and you listen very carefully, you will see, bam, it is I back in the house. I haven't been here since I've been in the South, so this is going to be a great show today. Number one, first of all, let me say, some of you guys are very hard on me. I didn't deserve some of the emails that you sent to me, but keep sending me your emails, even if I disagree with you. Larry Yates as is, that's LARRYYATESASIS @AOL.com. That's how you can talk about me and put me in check. But anyway, we have a great show today. We have lots of energy in here. But first of all, let me say, so much is happening. But let me start off by saying, my heart goes out to the family of the fallen officers and the senseless killings, because we as a nation, we have to do better. We don't have a choice in that. This is not something that we should do better. This is not something that we need to do better. No, this is something that we got to do better, because we cannot break down the fiber of this civilization, because without law enforcement, we have no civilization, people. So I want to say this real quick. The reason I'm jumping right in on this, I was watching Fox News, and they had some young lady, poor sister, and then my heart goes out to her, and they caught in camera young people saying, well, we need to get rid of the police department. You got to be kidding, because wherever the police department go, Larry will be right there behind them. So I'm leaving with them. If they go, I'm going. Wherever the police department go, Larry's going to be right there, because I am not going to be your hero. I'm not running and facing nobody. I'm afraid of water guns, so I'm not going to be your hero. So you better go and respect the ones that are willing to give their life and for you. But once again, I think that this is a serious matter, and I'm having a little bit of fun with it because my heart is heavy. And so for the sake of the show, I got to keep my heart together because there's so much pain. And as I look around, and I just traveled around the country, and we'll probably bring this up in the show with some people, but, as you know, I do radio, and I'm in the South. I was in Memphis, and an officer got killed down there. I'm in Mississippi, an officer got killed down there. Now, I know that we need to do better with our law enforcement. I know that we need to find a way. I think the subject today is going to be about dialogue. We have to start there. And killing policemen is not the way. And if some of you fools think you're going to send me emails talking about me being a sellout, you're right. I am a sellout, because I am not with your crazy ass if you're going to go out here shooting policemen. Not at all. But we can sit down and have some dialogue. And this is going to get better. It's going to get better. We, as African Americans, people of color, we've seen great changes in this country. And it has come with a battle, but it's been different battles. It's been battles out there in the classroom. It's been battles in the courtroom, but not battles with the police department with guns. Leave that alone. Leave it alone. But anyway, I have some wonderful guests here today, and she's going to beat up on me, but Miss Wrigley, Avis Ridley-Thomas. And the reason I'm having fun with it, because I was calling her Miss Thomas all day, and when we was in the green room, and she almost threw a pencil at me. I'm like, oh. And I said, well, now my name is Avis. But Miss Thomas, Thank you. Avis, thank you so much for being here.
It's a delight to be here with you. Thank you for having me today.
And how have you been?
I've been very well.
It's been a
thank
while.
you.
You're looking great. Got the
Thank
great
you.
energy. And how's the family?
The family.
Everybody's good?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your program.
The dispute resolution program was what I started in the city attorney's office in 1989. We trained in the period of time that I was there for the balance of my career in the city attorney's office. We trained 2,000 community mediators. So when I retired after 30 years, we were resolving all kinds of disputes, and we got involved in doing community-wide dialogues in 1995. My husband at that time was on the city council, and there had been the Million Man March and the O.J. Simpson criminal trial. And it was clear that our community needed to come together because we were very divided at that time.
I would like to say real quick for those that are joining us and that is not familiar with Ms. Thomas Avis, but her husband is Mark Ridley-Thomas, very well known young man in politics here in California, and I've been so proud of you and your family, and you gave me permission to say that your son is into politics, but I like what you're doing because you took an independent route, and so I wanted to let the audience know about this. So would you please continue?
Okay, and we, our community mediators were really committed to maintaining this organization, Days of Dialogue. So we've done various topics over the years. We've had a number on police-community relation, Days of Dialogue. And this one, this title was really recommended by the Association of Los Angeles County Deputy Sheriffs,
Really?
ALADS, yeah, the subject of the future of policing. And we started in 2015, the 50th anniversary of Watts, and we committed to do it for 1 year, to have dialogue throughout the community, because the police department at that time just saw a need to concentrate on the subject from a community relations point of view.
I remember because back when I first came out here in the early, it was late 70s, early 80s, and then we had Darrell Gates. And under Darrell Gates, was this during that time or was this after Darrell Gates?
Well, this was, the dispute resolution program started under Darrell Gates, and I still remember that in 92, we had finally gotten the solid support for the city attorney's dispute resolution program from Darrell Gates, and he did a video that was distributed throughout the department, and it was on the day of the civil unrest. They told me, yes, it did run throughout. Every officer was expected to see that, but just that very night. You know, isn't that ironic?
So, Avis, do me a favor. Would you introduce the guests?
These beautiful young women that you have graced this audience with are Dr. Sharoni Little, and she's the director of the Empowerment Congress.
Welcome, Doctor. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me to join
Can we
you
get an
today.
applause here? There we go. Get some applause.
And she's a professor at USC.
Yes.
And a Marine. You don't say a former Marine,
Correct.
right? Because once a Marine, always a Marine.
Absolutely.
Officer Camille Sosa is joining us too from the LA Police Department, and she is in the Community Relationship Division of that department and our primary liaison.
Officer, thank you for coming, and also thank you for your service. You know,
Thank you
because
so much.
I tell you, I just said I'm a wimp, man. I sit down, and people say, "Well, Larry, would you run and hide behind a woman?" Yes, that one right there.
And I'll gladly stand in front of you, sir.
So how have you been?
I've been good, thank
I know
you.
this has been pretty heavy on the hearts of fellow officers, and so the morale of the police department, and what are you seeing out there now?
Absolutely. It definitely impacts us and our morale. But as you said, we're resilient. We signed up for this. So regardless of who the bullets are coming from, we're willing to step forward and take charge because that's what we signed up for.
Okay.
But ultimately, there is a strong desire within our department, within all of law enforcement, for us to just come together, unite, come to terms, and work as a partnership as opposed to an us and them mentality.
I really appreciate you joining us and Avis for bringing this together because, and I want to thank Carolyn for bringing this team together and getting Avis on the phone. And Carolyn, thank you so much. You've put together a wonderful show here today. And so please continue telling me about the programs that you work.
Well, what we're concentrating on and have been for the past year, this Days of Dialogue on the Future of Policing. We could not have known that at this period of time, just as we were concluding our original commitment, that suddenly this would become, again, a very important issue that people have the opportunity to urgently address in our community. And so what we're doing now is trying to see what we may be able to do in raising funds to continue the effort over the next year, because I think it's going to take us some time to work on these issues. And we have to really just take the first step in getting people committed to participating in the dialogue process. And it may take more time for some people to decide it's appropriate to sit at the table and have a discussion about the issues that concern them and the conflicts that we are having, the perspectives that we have on various issues, and how we can most constructively move forward.
Ms. Sharoni, thank you so much for that, Avis. Ms. Sharoni, how did you get involved in this?
Well, I am the coordinator for the Empowerment Congress, and the Empowerment Congress is a civic engagement organization that has been committed to the community and really partnerships, which is indicative of the dialogue since 1992. And it was founded by our then Los Angeles councilman and now Supervisor Mark Ridley-Thomas. And it came about, as Ms. Avis was talking about earlier, from the community and concerns and finding an outlet and opportunity based upon a core mission to educate, to engage, and to empower the community. Because as was stated, there are many issues that are facing our community, and we have very different perspectives, but oftentimes we don't have the tools to really bring about change within our community, to really advocate, and to instruct the community to advocate for themselves. And so Supervisor Mark Ridley-Thomas found, in partnership with the community, a way in which to provide those constituents access to elected officials, neighborhood organizations, faith-based organizations, to say, how can you come together on your own behalf? And so since 1992, there are now 10 committees around very pressing issues, whether it be education or health or public safety and justice, which, as you can imagine, is one of the very topical committees. Arts and culture, finding multitude of ways to come together. And so the Empowerment Congress really serves as a model of civic engagement, and it has been a national model, which I can share a little bit later, as communities around the country have come to see just this in what we're talking about today in terms of dialogue. How do you get differing communities with differing perspectives, oftentimes around conflict, to come together to build a collective community? Because if not, we will have the outcomes that we've seen over the past week.
Let me ask you a question. How do you see that helping with policemen? I mean, as far as fair treatment from the police department?
Well, clearly the Empowerment Congress came about to address some systemic concerns, right? So institutional racism, economic inequities, but it never was in opposition to all of the community, which the law enforcement is clearly a part of. And so historically, we have built opportunities and collaborations, recognizing that everyone must work together. So we've partnered for Days of Dialogues for many years. And so we've had some right after the Trayvon Martin murder and then the subsequent verdict for George Zimmerman, we had another dialogue. It gave people opportunity to talk. We had a Young Boys of Men of Color with Compton and law enforcement where they came together on a Saturday and really sat down human to human, adult and young person, to really understand what are some of the stereotypes that we have. If we don't work collectively to break down some of the barriers, to recognize, though, that there are some concerns, but to also recognize that we will only come to a solution together.
Well, let me ask you a question now. But does the police department recognize racism within its organizations?
I would say that many of the officers recognize that we live in a society and you cannot separate law enforcement from our broader society, and that there are some societal concerns that have been persistent that we still are addressing, right? So even in the medical profession and in law enforcement, there are inequities. And I do believe that many officers, that law enforcement as a whole, recognize that we need to have this conversation. I know President Obama has brought together, over the past 2 years, convened law enforcement and community members and elected officials across the country, because we do acknowledge that there are some real concerns, but that we must work together.
And officer, I'm sorry, please give me your name again.
Camille.
Camille, I'm from Mississippi, so if I mess up your name, you can just jump. Camille, as far as you can answer within the framework of staying within the legal frameworks of law enforcement, does the police department recognize that there is racism within its departments, or is that something that they
You'll have to forgive me. I'm by no means an expert in terms of our department, and I can't speak on behalf of the chief or anything. But what I do know is our department does have a biased policing policy, which is specifically designed to address that, to address implicit bias, to address that there's a zero tolerance for any sort of discrimination based on someone's religious belief, based on their race or ethnicity, based on their gender, sexual orientation. So that zero tolerance applies to all of us officers. That's its purpose. It's not for the community, it's for officers. And I think that in itself recognizes that as humans, we all come to the table with our innate biases that we develop as we grow, or the world that we're born into. And I think that is the department's way of addressing that. Kind of combined with that, we have ongoing training. My division, actually, which I'm very lucky and very grateful to be a part of, is specifically in place to kind of help bridge the gap between our patrol officers who are trying to do their job with the many things that we put on them and demand of them, both community and as a department, and the community. So we have different organizations, different ways of approaching them, but Days of Dialogue has been one of, personally, in my experience, the most effective ways to, if I could quote our mayor and Chief Scott, to create a safe place and a safe space for us. So this creates an environment for our officers where they don't feel like they have to be defensive or they have to have their guard up, but where they can share their experiences. That in itself humanizes us to our community members and allows them to have a safe place and safe space that, regardless of whether or not I'm an officer, I'm not here to chastise you or to have any kind of repercussions within the law against you for sharing your experience with law enforcement. So I think that's been beneficial, and kind of addressing those implicit biases or those pre-notions that we all kind of have based on whether it's media or our past experiences and our perceptions of different cultures.
Absolutely. Ms. Avis?
They also have now in the city attorney's office a biased policing mediation program.
Yes.
So if people have complaints or issues that they want to address with individual police officers, there's now a mechanism to do that. And that's a part of the program that I used to run, the dispute resolution program. So I'm so proud that it has finally come to fruition.
Yes.
And that allows an individual to ask for a mediation, a sit-down meeting with an officer with whom they have had an experience that they consider discourteous or
We have a caller?
biased.
Yeah, let's take the caller.
Oh, okay. All right.
Hello, caller.
Hi, this is Larry.
This is Larry.
Hey, Larry. Ted Hayes, Los Angeles.
Ted, how you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. How about yourself?
I'm doing really, really good. Would you like to throw something into the conversation there? A question, Ted?
Well, I several years ago, I went to the Los Angeles Police Commission when a lot of things were going on with the LAPD and black folks. And I said that, commissioners, seems like whenever something goes wrong in the black community, and the police do something as we interpret it, the religious leaders and the community leaders come down here to the police commission and they harangue you about police reform, police reform, police reform. You guys are doing a pretty good job, but when are you going to tell the religious leaders in the community and the other leaders in the community to reform the black community? This is an issue of behavior. If you take the police out of the community, and I would advocate taking the police out of the community and resorting to a firehouse type of response. You only come when called for. Perhaps that will change things, or at least it'll clarify that the issue is not so much the police. The issue is the bad behavior in the community. We cry the blues about what is it? 2 million men are in prison. 2.5 million men are in prison. 1 million are black men. Almost half of that population are serving life sentences without parole. But how'd they get there? They committed crimes against black people. So if we start loving one another and treating one another in the community, whether the policeman is racist or a good guy, we won't need the police in the community.
Well, let me ask you a question. For the sake of time, Ted, I really appreciate your passion. You know, I appreciate your passion. But there is, being a devil's advocate here, but there is a bias in the legal system where black men and black people are convicted more for the same crime. They're given more time for the same crime. In fact, in Ferguson, one of the things that blew up in Ferguson because the city was making money off giving black people tickets unnecessarily way above the norm. So we have to put those into the account as well. So some of it is not our behaviors, although we have to work on ourselves now.
Mama told me, Mom and Daddy raised me and said, Ted, now if you know there's bullies on that corner over there, stay out from over that corner. Go another way. Because if you go over and get beat up by the bullies, don't come back to me complaining. Now, if we know there's the racist cops out there, and if we know that the system is rigged, then we should make sure that when we get in our cars that our license plates are correct, our lights are correct, we drive right. If we know that, don't play into the man's hand. How hard is that?
Well, yeah, I tell you, but here again, myself, being the model citizen that I am, I've been stopped 20 million times by the cops with right tags and right this, and they say, "Oh, Larry, you didn't hold your mouth right. I didn't like the way your eyes were sitting in your head, officer. I had nothing to do with that. But talk to my mom and dad." But would anybody else like to address?
Well, I'd like to address the number of calls for service that I know that LAPD gets a year, and it's about 3 million calls for service. And I asked them in designing the dispute resolution program how many were appropriate for mediation, that is, people voluntarily coming together to try to resolve it. And they thought about half of those were appropriate. So at that time, I think that the police were beginning to recognize that a lot of the disputes didn't require really their services if people would agree to try and resolve them. And the dispute resolution program really relies on community volunteers who are trained to resolve disputes. And that's an underutilized resource. So more and more people who know about that can ask. Our mission was a mediator on every block. And you can ask for those services. They're provided without charge. I don't consider anything free because somebody has to pay something. But it's provided without charge for members of the public. And fortunately, the city still has the dispute resolution program. So that is a resource that can be used to resolve disputes.
You would like to say something?
Yes, I think going back to the caller, it's never an either or. I think it's a both and, but we have to acknowledge the disproportionality of especially black men and even black women and men of color who are disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system historically. And if we look historically, really law enforcement was designed and came out of a slavery system, right? So it was a slave catcher, and then you moved into lynching, and many of the lynchings occurred from police houses by law enforcement. And so we cannot forget that history. Thankfully, we've seen a lot of reform, and I think one of the key reasons is because we're seeing much more diversity within law enforcement, but we cannot underestimate or ignore the prison industrial complex, and that there might be motive or intentionality in perpetuating a system that might unfairly and, as I said, disproportionately impact communities. Thankfully, we have these opportunities to dialogue so that we can acknowledge that. I think in any conflict situation, you must acknowledge the reality, the past and the present, before you can ever develop resolution or mediation. So I don't think that it's either or, it's both and yes, we within our own community must acknowledge ways in which we have to have our own agency, but it does not ignore, it does not dismiss systemic issues that perpetuate the realities that we face and many boys and men of color face.
Officer, would
Well,
you like
here's
to speak? Go ahead.
another point, though. When you go down to the county courthouse and go sit in on some of those trials, and you see these young men and women get convicted and put away with exorbitant sentences, you look at the jury boxes, you don't see us. You go down to the jury room, you don't see us. You see every other ethno-racial group but black folks. You see, we are not participating in the justice system. We have got to get in there. We've got to show the system we care about our young people. The judge looks out in the room. He sees no one there supporting this young man. Says, you know what? You have no one. I'm going to put you in prison where you will at least be safe there and not back on the streets hurting yourself or anybody else. That's how they reason.
Well, we've had
That's our fault, though. That's our fault.
Yeah.
We've had recent findings that showed where, in some cases, juries, black people in particular, were precluded from serving on juries. And so we must also look systemically at why blacks and people of color are underrepresented in many jury processes.
Well, Ted, thank you so much.
What few that do go. I got on a jury. A couple times I got on a jury.
But Ted, thank you so much for calling in. And
Absolutely.
look here, you know how much I love you now.
Vice versa.
So let's talk, Ted. Let's talk soon.
Absolutely. Shalom, everybody. Blessings to you. Hey, and Miss Ridley-Thomas, please tell the supervisor I said hello.
I will indeed.
Okay.
Thanks so much for your
Y'all.
call.
All right. Thank you so much, Ted. And Officer, would you like to add something to to what was stated there?
As Dr. Little stated, I think the diversity within our department, within all of law enforcement, has definitely helped. Being half black and half Mexican myself, I think that gives me my own unique experience to bring into the type of officer I'm going to be, the type of officer and work ethic I contribute to my department, to my division, to my partners that I work with. So that absolutely has an impact. And speaking on the history of cultures in general, I think you have to acknowledge where you've been in order to know where you're moving towards.
Yeah, well, see, the whole thing, anytime you're judging a human being, and especially in today's world, you have to consider three things. And this is just the way I look at things. You have to consider environment, culture, and religion. And so when you look at environment, culture, and religion, then you can see some component of how we came to be where we are now. We are a product of slavery. That's a fact. That was our environment. We came from Jim Crow. This has been our environment. It was not our culture. The culture that we now involved, that we have now taken on as our culture, was not our culture. It was forced on us. So there's a lot of subconscious rebellion against a colonializing, not just of the land, but the minds of the people have been colonialized. And that is one of the things that subconsciously, that every human being that is taken away from his natural order is going to rebel against him. And a lot of the time, this is what you're seeing manifest itself in our young people.
I think we also have to take into account mental health issues. That
Absolutely.
I think that many of us are hesitant to address sometimes. And those issues sometimes emerge from the experiences that we've had just trying to have a good quality life. But I do think that mental health is of primary concern, especially these recent police shootings. I think there was some evidence that there was something that went seriously wrong with these individuals. It was not identified and addressed before they decided to act
The last
so
couple,
violently.
the last two had been in the military, had been in
In the military,
been in war,
and that could have been
what is it called, post
traumatic
Post-traumatic
stress.
stress.
That could have been a factor in their behavior. But I think that's a serious consideration that we sometimes neglect to address because of the stigma.
Now, with the
involved.
monologue and dialogue that we are talking about in the community, how do we get to justice? Because it's at the end of the day, the biggest fight is justice. It's human nature to want it, and in order for instance, I know I'm babbling a little bit. The statistics have shown that if a woman is violated, she go to court. She's violated again, just having to get on the stand and talk about the violation. If the perpetrator gets off, it's harder for her to heal. But if the perpetrator is found guilty and convicted, she has a better chance of healing because justice has been shown to help heal the spirit, the soul, and the consciousness. Where do we get that with injustice from the police department?
Well, I think that there are opportunities through addressing human being again to human being, the concerns that you have, and some people need more of the focus. I promoted more and more dialogue and more mediation.
I support
and
that.
Every opportunity anybody wanted to exercise that option, that's what I was advocating. So that some people then begin to learn that their behavior is impacting somebody adversely, and you get to be in a safe space to explore what that meant to that person, what that means to me, and maybe it leads to self-reflection in individual situations and perhaps even policy changes depending on what your level of responsibility is. But hearing from those human beings in this setting that allows you to safely explore whatever those biases may be, I think can help lead us more toward justice. And that's just my contribution.
No, I think that's a very brilliant one because I think a key phrase that you made there was safely explore, to be able to sit down and dialogue and safely explore these biases. Professor, you wanted to?
And I was going to say that's the power of the Empowerment Congress, because oftentimes we stay in our own silos. And so the police will talk with the police, and the community will talk with the community, and the elected officials will speak with one another. But you must come together, one, just to know the various perspectives, but two, to have that safe opportunity to share and say, oh, I did not realize that from your vantage point, this is how you're experiencing this. This is the pain. And going back to mental health, the trauma that the community is facing. So both the trauma of witnessing violence and killings, the trauma of the police, having to deal with many of the issues. And so when you bring hurt people and you don't address those concerns, then you will get multiple outcomes. But when you bring people together to at least express and share, that's what the dialogue does. It begins to start the conversation and then develop tools to engage with one another humanely.
Yeah, what's the website?
Daysofdialogue.org is our website. The Empowerment Congress also has a website.
Yes, it's empowermentcongress.org, and that's where you can actually register for this Saturday, July 23rd. We're having a dialogue at 10 a.m. The doors will open at 9:30, so we really encourage you to please go to the website again, empowermentcongress.org, so that you can register. We really would like all members of the community to come out and have this important and vital conversation.
We also have futureofpolicing.org through Days of Dialogue, which will have a list of our past events, of our future and upcoming events. Just in my partnering with Days of Dialogue, I have been our liaison between LAPD and Days of Dialogue in coordinating one event a month in our various divisions. And I think absolutely the most empowering thing has been working with our officers to do a different kind of outreach. It's easy for us sometimes to, as Dr. Little said, stay in our comfort zones, to kind of stay in what we consider outreach or partnering with the community. It's a difficult task to ask an officer, especially in today's current climate. to do outreach with people that maybe aren't our supporters, to do outreach with people who might have differing opinions and ask them to come to the table with us and speak with us, and convincing them and our officers that it is a safe place, that we do have mediators in place who are trained and educated to ensure that everyone has a platform to share their experience and their voice.
Wow, I just want to thank you guys for coming here. I just love this dialogue. Professor, you was about to say?
No, I was just saying we're modeling it, and that's, again, the Empowerment Congress. We have our annual summit, and we hold that every January, and we bring over 1,500 community members, again, coming from various backgrounds and experiences, and we are coming up on our 25th anniversary. And so we feel that, as you said, the world is still experiencing some of the same things that we were experiencing in 1992. And as you said, how do we bring about justice? So it's important that we continue to work together to identify legislation, to identify community relationships and outcomes. And I think that's the way we continue to work toward this.
Well, I'm going to go back to something that you said a few minutes ago, and I think it's very important that not forgetting the history.
Yes.
Because when we talk about the abuse of, especially African Americans and stuff, let's go back to the 1600s. Hello, 1600s. Police brutality and abuse of a people called African Americans or black did not start yesterday. It did not start with Jim Crow. It did not even start with slavery. It started before they even put them on the ships. So the abuse go back to the 1600s. So we've been going through this for almost 400 years. So people forget and think that this is something new. And I say that to say to the young people that are getting frustrated out there, that feels that you want to pick up arms, remember, most of the gains that we have made in almost 400 years has always been about boots on the ground, people dialoguing, people getting up for change. And I will say one thing. Now, this is not for my panel to agree. This is what I say. You know, Black Lives Matter brought a lot of the conversation to the table. But anytime you feel like you want to pick up a gun against the police department, just listen to Uncle Larry. Black dollars matter. Keep your damn dollar in your pocket. They will come running and ask you how can they help you. Now, you figure out where you're going to stop spending it. I'm not out there doing it. Black dollars matter because you watch where you spend your money, you bring about a change in your community. And this is one of the things that I think we have to really go back and really revisit on how we're spending our dollars. You can yell, you can scream, you can do all of this right here, but if you're still giving someone a paycheck, they're not going to listen to you. You pull that paycheck back. Now, I'm not using the word how you say it? Boycott. I'm just telling you, black dollars matter. So take that wherever you want it. So, I'm sorry, but because that was one of the things that got us to where we are. That's what got us some of the rights. It wasn't shooting and killing policemen. We never had to do that. That's absolutely crazy.
Well, and I think there is no struggle. I mean, there is no progress without struggle. We recognize that we do have to work hard on these issues that are very, very difficult for us to change, very intractable. And it's always important to work on oneself. Self-reflection is critical, and knowing yourself.
I'm about to call you Avis now.
That's also, it's not just a projection of those things out there. It's what am I doing? How am I participating in my community? What am I doing to try to be a constructive force for change?
Yes.
For the betterment of our neighborhoods, our society, our schools, our whole environment.
And that brings us to three of the core principles of the Empowerment Congress, which are participatory democracy, reciprocal accountability, and intentional civility. And they're important, and in layman's terms, it means that you must participate. You have to get engaged.
I'm from Mr. Tippett. Would you repeat that whole thing again? It's like, wait a minute. She just, whoa, wait a minute.
They're important.
But
they're words, but they're very
But I think they're very
strategic.
important.
Yes.
So would you
The core principles of the Empowerment Congress are participatory democracy, which means that you must be part of your own agency. You must get involved. And so you can't stand on the porch and say what's going on in the street. You have to move out of your fence and get there. Reciprocal accountability means that I can't just blame someone else. We all have to come together and hold one another accountable, but we do recognize their power dynamics. And so some have more ability to influence the outcome, but we all need to get there and say, it's not just you, it's not just me. And finally, which is very important to the supervisor, is this notion of intentional civility, that we're not going to just have a free-for-all. We're not going to do it in a manner in which that will be destructive, but that we will maintain our civility. And it takes an intentional strategy to maintain civility, especially when you recognize some of the things we've talked about. As we've said, there is a clear history, what I call perpetual surveillance, that we've experienced historically of people of color, where it's a control mechanism. And when people try to move out of that, you see structures to maintain that. And so that's a reality. However, we still must maintain our civility. We still must fight for what we want, not from afar, but right in front. And it may cost us sometimes to march or to make decisions about spending your dollars. But if you work together with that accountability, you can begin to bring about systemic change and justice and equity.
I totally agree. I think that, and like Avis said earlier, is that, everybody have their part. Managing my dollars may be my part. Doing the dialogue or monologue, getting out here marching is somebody else's. So we all play a part in it. And what has happened is it is not just a black problem. I think that we are getting so caught up in saying African American problem and people of color problem. Now, no question about it. We are on the brunt end of it. But this is an American problem now. This is a nation problem. This is a problem that this particular nation, this civilization, cannot grow until we work with this one. This will stop us from reaching the highest potentials of a nation that we hold so dear in our hearts. Officer, would you like to say something?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more that it's a national issue, and it's not something, not to take away from anyone's story or their experience, but it's not something that we should just isolate to one culture, because that's where we all kind of retreat back into, well, that's not me, right? My husband's Hispanic and I'm only half black, so maybe that's not my issue. Instead, I think acknowledging and being accountable for this is our society's issue. This is our nation's issue. And what are we going to do to contribute to that and to better our society? And I think just continuing to come together, continuing this dialogue, and being willing, as an officer or just as a community member, to say, I'm part of this community and I want more and I want better for us.
Well, one of the things that I can't deny what Ted said was that we as individuals in our community, we got to clean up our community. There's no question about that. We got to let the officers know that we're working with them. And we can't just always come with our hands out. So we really have to get together and this is just like my little small pet peeve thing here, and we just have too many mothers, young children, mothers raising these young children out here, and I don't have the answers. I have open arms and open minds for leaders to help guide me and say, well, Larry, we need you to help me do this. And there are some things I hopefully opening up this microphone to the community and say, come on, let's have what's that? Dialogue. And so hopefully that's one of the things that I'm trying to do, and anything that you guys see that I might be to participate in, I'm more than glad to join in on that. But you was about to say something.
I was going to say that we really do need to begin to identify strategies. I'm the mother of twin 17-year-old sons, and I know Miss Avis has twin sons as well, so she's my role model in that. And we really need to move from this conversation of post-racial, I call it post-hatred. We really need to recognize that, and I think education is a great conduit. When we look at statistics, for example, of young black boys, if they are not reading by the 4th grade, we see very startling alarming statistics about their life outcomes, about not only where they'll be in 8th grade or 12th grade, but their dropout rates and their, economic outcomes. And so we really need to intervene, as you said, for our entire nation. We have a statistic was shown that white children are not graduating. And so we need to be concerned about white children, Asian children, black children, Hispanic children. And then we also need to, at the same time, acknowledge 14% of black children are reading at a 4th grade level. What is going on? And so I think as we move forward with these conversations, that is what will bring us solutions. That is what will give us that.
This time is going by so fast. But just going back, using a little bit of history like you, a lot of people don't realize that the racial program that we are under now, after the Jim Crow, after the turn of the century, did not come because black people and white people was hating each other. They were actually working together. The farmers, the coming of the manufacturing and the whole bit. But what happened is a lot of people after Jim Crow, well, a lot of people don't realize that during this time, the white people went to, after the slavery, after the freeing of slavery, they went to the white business owners and corporations and said, we want to raise. We can't raise our families on this pay that you're giving us. The white business owner said, if you don't shut up and keep your job, we'll give it to the Negroes, because those Negroes will work for a lot less money than you. Mm-hmm. And then what they did then, brought in a program and said, well, how can we keep the white guy taking low wages and still keep him happy? Well, very simple, to make him feel better than that black guy. And what they did then, that's when they came in with the black water fountain, the white water fountain. When they came in, when you go through the back door, he goes through the front door. That's when that came in. It was economics. It had nothing to do with white people hating black people at that time. It has now turned into that because it became such a big money-making machine. Racism is one of the biggest money-making machines in the nation, as we see, when you look at it like this. This is why it was okay for them to say, no illegals coming in, but to open the back door and say, okay, we'll hire them. Mm-hmm. It's economics. So when we understand that we are fighting under economics, then we have a little bit of different approach to how we're going to deal with the product of that, which is now racism.
Well, racism is such a challenging issue, and even recognizing one's biases. So I know that Harvard has an index on implicit bias that people can take to just explore their own without anybody else being involved.
Really?
In that. Right. You can go online and just they're conducting the research, and I'm sure that there will be research papers that come out of that. The way that you answer the questions, they'll give you feedback on the biases that you indicate according to their theory of the biases that we have against one another.
And I got a lot of them.
All of us do. That's the thing. All of us do, yes. And so exploring one's own, that's very important. Mm-hmm. And certainly seeing these systemic issues and how we may be influencing that, by the behavior that we engage in is important as well. And beginning to challenge. So how do we constructively challenge those systems that have been long in place? That we see the outcomes as, the poor educational outcomes, the criminal justice outcomes. So many people in jail and disproportionately who they are. And I remember an experience in court where a young black man, clearly mentally ill, rocking back and forth, grimacing and smiling at various times. It was startling that the system was everybody was just doing their job. He was accused of beating up 8 very healthy, buff sheriff deputies. And he's rocking back and forth. I was not the first juror sitting there who said something. The first juror or juror before me said, "Look at the guy. He's goofy. I mean, is something wrong with him?" The judge is going about her business. The bailiffs, all these members of the public are there to serve as jurors. So when I went back to my office in a break, this was before they interviewed me, I said, this is a waste of our resources. It's, the young man is mentally ill, so obviously he's rocking back and forth. But everybody was doing their job. So my office told me, you just don't get put in jail for contempt of court. Whatever it is you say, we don't want to have to come out there and get you out of jail. So I found a way to say, I'm worried about how we are using our resources.
Absolutely.
And so they, released me, thanked, and excused me
resources.
from that. That's right. That's what, because, think of what it took for this courtroom to operate for this young man who clearly needed something else.
Well, when you look at how, you just look on the national level what they did with this email with Hillary Clinton. Look how much money they've spent on that, but they won't pass a bill for the Zika virus. How is it? The Zika virus? Zika virus for mosquitoes. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So we really know how to waste money when we really want to in this country.
But I think that's why alternatives are needed, like conversations and dialogue, because what that does with trained moderators and mediators is that it provides a different venue. I think we are all relational. Our stories matter, and that's how we get validated. And I think that's why we need to go back to this model, because in too many instances, we are so separated, we don't talk to one another.
And, and I was really with... because I'm in a study course of psychology and getting my qualification for certified, which you don't have to be nationally certified as a life coach, but I've taken some psychology course for that. But I went through the Imago program, and the Imago program is designed to help people sit down and learn to listen to each other. We haven't been taught how to listen to each other. We've been taught to talk, and we say, "Well, I hear that, and I hear you." But like me and Avis was talking earlier, is that most of the time we are not listening.
Yes.
We are not listening. We have this break because we have a preconceived notion about the conversation that we're having, and wait for you to make a mistake. Then we jump in, and then we call it, "Well, I heard you," but that's not listening.
Absolutely.
We have to listen to each other. Because at the end of the day, we all have this little bit of thing called childhood pain that is affecting us today. Whether we're policemen, politicians, doctors, lawyers.
We do. They've done some research on ACEs. That's what they're called, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And there's a correlation between those experiences and all kinds of health outcomes and criminal justice outcomes and educational outcomes. So Dr. Bob Ross at the California Endowment, who was a pediatrician, that's how he started his career before being selected to head the California Endowment, had a nice panel discussion about those adverse childhood experiences, and thinks that if we begin to look at what happens in childhood, with many of these folks who grow up to have whatever problems and challenges are being presented, including health issues such as diabetes and heart disease. It's really groundbreaking, this research on adverse
I knew this
childhood
hour
care.
was going to go by, so we got about 2 minutes. Here's what I like to end the show, giving everybody a last words of wisdom before we go. And so I start with you, officer. Once again, thank you for your service and thank you for what you do.
Thank you, and I'm humbled to be here in your presence, in each of your presence. I think in closing, absolutely mental illness is one of those issues that, again, it's not a cultural, it's not a city, it's a nation-wide issue. And I think our department has attempted to take measures, and our city, our mayor asking for funding and getting those resources allocated to get individuals help that they need. Our officers did receive a lot of training. Personally, I have my education in psychology, and I'm seeking my master's in marriage, family, and child therapy because it's an area of interest. And I've taken a lot of training within our department. So it's not for lack of understanding mental illness and how to help those individuals, but it's in the guise of working as a law enforcement officer and having to stop certain situations from happening, our officers' hands are tied.
Thank you so much for that. And give us words of wisdom to say goodbye.
Thank you again so much for having me. I just want to remind everyone that the Empowerment Congress is a place just for these types of opportunities to have community conversations and dialogues, whether we're coming together to talk about community policing or homelessness, human trafficking, education, mental health, and economic development. The Empowerment Congress is a space for the community to come together collectively, and it is important for us to continue this very important conversation about how we treat our community members.
Thank
as a
you
whole.
so much. I'm not going to say Miss Thomas. Avis.
All right. I'm going to encourage everybody to come to the Days of Dialogue on the Future of Policing this Saturday, the 23rd of July, at the Constituent Service Center in Exposition Park at 10 a.m. And to go online, Days of Dialogue or futureofpolicing.org.
Or empowermentcongress.org as well.
That's right, for more information. And I'd really appreciate you having us on today.
Thank
This is a
you.
very important topic, and I do appreciate
And you guys promised to come back. I got you on air.
Absolutely.
You promised to get me involved somewhere.
Absolutely.
See, they
You take the call.
Got that. Anyway, this is. Thank you guys so much. It's just Officer, Professor Avis. Thank you guys so much. And remember, you know, your black dollars matters. Don't pick up no gun. Put your dollar back in your pocket. Anyway, you know, communication is one of the most important things that a human being can have. And we are so blessed by a higher power to give us that power to sit down and listen and hear each other out. Take the time to listen to each other, and you will find in the midst there's a little bit of healing there. Anyway, remember, like I always say, a nation can rise no higher than it elevates its woman. See you next time.